So I thought that after it's funny because you published the Blair Witch Project one, the solo one, and I listened to it, and I already knew kind of going into it like what you would just had in general thought of the film, and after we had watched Altered States, was it Altered States or Altered State? Doesn't matter. But anyway, we watched that movie, and the thing that I've been thinking about just with those last two have been how should we review and watch older movies? And I ask that because like I think there's an inherent bias to a lot of older stuff as being a movie that just can't withstand the test of time. Like I especially Altered States. Like I watched that movie and I think, you know, this again, like I said this in our review, this was an ambitious idea. It just, I don't know if it was a lack for budget or if it was plot cohesion or whatever, but you know, I see that movie and I think, God, if it were 1982, if it were 2 years after release, what would we have thought of that? And I'm curious like what your take is on how should we review older movies? Because the other thing I think is like, I think a lot of these directors that release a movie, I don't think they expect that movie to be able to be judged on the same merits it had when it first came out.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just all I had.
Yeah. I think, it's funny because I think, well, to kind of hammer off the two differences, like we talk about the older movies that we watch and the two that we have specifically discussed before it was the Blair Witch Project, and then Altered States, right? I think they're two different types of movies, and like the older style it differs between the two. Like I think the Blair Witch Project is older, yeah, of course, right? 19 whatever it was, 1990, what was it, 6?
I think it's 99.
99. So, and I don't think it's a bad film. I think because the point was the found footage, right? It was the found footage film. So the part that didn't age well, right, is like the marketing, like again, and I think that kind of does tie back to what you're saying, like how do we approach these films whenever, they don't really age well, but I don't think the directors are thinking about like how will this movie age. I think now we can think of films like that because back then a lot of their stuff and their substance came from practicality, because now film, I mean, and this is just like me being maybe 100% biased, but like film now won't change for a long time. Like a film now might be like 2024. A film in 2024 will likely be confused for a film maybe in 2050, 54, 30 years from now. Because
Yeah, and go
it's
ahead.
because like I mean, how much different can a movie be, right? I mean, the reason why I feel like it's the 1980 film Altered States looks 80s is because, well, first of all, it was shot on practical film, like physical media, and all of those effects are physical effects, you know. So I think they had to like they can't like spoof things as much as like you could now. So I don't know. I think there's it's kind of hard. It's hard to approach because like the type of oldness differs because again, like I said, the Blair Witch Project kind of in the marketing. Altered States more about like I mean that was older still. Yeah, that's a good question though. I don't really know how to view films like that, at least from a
Yeah.
critical standpoint, like as a critic, like, and I wouldn't even call myself a critic, just like an average guy watching film. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean
It's
like this is a struggle that I've had, and like to be super clear, like this isn't even so much like this isn't even like listening to what you thought of the Blair Witch Project and be like, Pat's wrong. I told you this before. Like, for some people, that movie and lots of other movies, whether they're critically acclaimed or not, they just don't hit for some people, and that's totally cool. Like, that does not bother me in the slightest. I think for me, I struggle. I feel like I can't. I guess for me, I feel like I can't give some movies a fair shake because of its age, and a lot of times, which sucks, because it's like I feel like I can't watch some of the older horror movies and feel like I can't get over the gap, whether, like you were describing, whether it's a visual gap, like the Altered States kind of thing, or maybe it's like Blair Witch, where it's more handheld, and that genre has sort of evolved quite a bit since then. I think for me, like, so I watched a lot of Simpsons episodes. Like, I've watched The Simpsons for a very long time, and I think that if you look at like those earlier seasons of The Simpsons, like seasons, I don't know, 3 through 11 or something like that, it's like, to me, some of the best sitcom television there is. But I don't know that somebody who is new to the series could watch that and feel the same way, because of not even just the visual differences or the humor differences, but I guess humor has something to do with it. Is that, like, it just culturally isn't relevant anymore. Like, a lot of the stuff they were joking about, a lot of where it gets its value, is just like not culturally there anymore.
Yeah, I think I know. I was thinking the same thing. I mean, when you think of like some memes that are relevant now, when you look at like Simpsons, like, that humor, like the cultural humor is, it's definitely like, yeah, it's lost. And it's funny because like you always see those like little blips. It's like not even very obvious, but it's always like in the the location, right? Like they're going to a like Disney, and then Disney has a sign that has something that was funny to Disney back in whenever the season was, like early 2000s, and that just isn't the case anymore. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks because and the other thing too is, like, I bring this up as like more of a general discussion versus like us coming together for an answer. Like, I don't know if there's an answer to this question. I think it's something that, like, me as a casual viewer and somebody who is maybe not all that educated in film in general, I don't know that I can look back at some of those older movies and really appreciate them for what they are. And I kind of felt like we felt a little bit of this when we were talking about Altered States, because when we were discussing that, I looked up the release date, and it was 1980, and then we looked at like the release date of the remake of The Fly, and it was like, what was it, like 86?
Yeah, it was older, or was it newer? I mean,
yeah, it was like quite a bit afterwards, and so like that alone made me feel like, oh, whoa, I didn't really care for Altered States for a lot of reasons, but I also felt like maybe if I had known that it was, I don't know, like trying to set or like maybe was an inspiration for movies that are more critically acclaimed, I would have appreciated it more. But I feel like I have a really hard time of watching some of these horror movies, and really movies in general, or any media for that matter, from that far back, and being able to appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think I think it's, I always wonder, like, we're mid-30s, so we're like a certain demographic, and I think certain 90s films that we would watch would be like, that was like more of like the nostalgic factor for us. It was like, oh, those 90s films are so good, and then some of these like newer generations where maybe they were born in early 2000s and they watch a 90s film or an 80s film or something, and they're like, this is just the worst, kind of like how we did. But like, I wonder if it meant more to people like our parents, or people who were like, the target demographic for a film like that in the 80s, right? So I'm guessing it's probably like like late teens, 30s crowd, maybe like a lot more younger populations. I don't know. To me, it feels like it would have hit harder with someone though. Some of those people maybe born like the '60s, and where again art was appreciated, or like film was appreciated entirely different. But also in the guise of these films may have inspired films like The Fly. It was very sciency, going back to Altered States, it's a very science type film, like a mad scientist, like bent on his work. But even still, those tropes go back to like Frankenstein. But I mean, in terms of an actual film, the story of Frankenstein is perfect. I mean, it just that withstood time. But did the movie withstand time? Like, did the you know I've never seen it, so I can't say. I don't want to say to an extent of how it affected me, but like maybe people now kind of feel that same dissonance, I guess, with films that are older. Like it just doesn't stand up. But the technology
Yeah,
again
I
is
think
so
a lot of
different.
those. I think a lot of movies that are victim to this are the ones that are trying to do something. Um, I don't know, like visually ambitious. I think movies that try to do that can fall into this trap. Like Altered States is like that. I would even though it kind of falls on a totally opposite end of the spectrum, I would almost say that the Blair Witch Project is kind of like that. It's trying to be very, very lo-fi, and not super, super like high fidelity with crazy visuals.
Hmm.
But I feel like that movie. I mean, you said this earlier when you were talking about like the marketing for that movie in particular. It's
Hmm.
like it was riding a cultural wave that just couldn't be maintained
Hmm.
in 2024. Like,
Right.
I think that there are probably people who really like that movie. Like, I think there are plenty of people who probably still really enjoy it. I think it's an okay movie, but I think that it just couldn't possibly be, and many other movies are like this, it just couldn't possibly be a movie that could hang on to that cultural significance
Hmm.
long enough to be reviewed
Hmm.
and enjoyed at in the same way that it
Yeah.
was in 1999.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think I do. I definitely make light of that in my personal review, and I went back a few times and kind of listened to bits and pieces of what I had to say, and I would still think that I hold the same beliefs. I think a lot of its fear is lost in the culture aspect, and it doesn't just go with fear. It could, a lot of the funny of a different movie is lost in cultural aspects. A lot of the nuances are lost in the cultural aspects of certain movies. Like films from like even the 1920s, 30s, 40s. Wherever. But yeah, I think this film specifically lost that because it was the first found footage. It's not the first. I'm not gonna say it's the first. It was the first well done found footage film that was
It
like
was
big
certainly like
screen.
one of the ones that popularized it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. There's no disagreeing with that, and I'm sure there's many, many home movie makers that have done things like this, and of course, it kind of probably came where the some of the inspiration was. But um, yeah, I think that it nails that category very, very well. I think it's scary when it comes down to that, and then again, I think a lot of the hype and the fear of it was that again, this was real, that this was actually about a missing documentary or a missing, a documentary about missing kids, and they just happened to find. And I think I don't know if you believed it, but I know that there are certain people, certainly people who thought that was real.
Yeah, yeah. It tries to portray itself as like a convincing, like
Hmm.
true story kind of thing.
Hmm.
Almost in the same way that Paranormal Activity does. Like, it doesn't have credits. It doesn't have,
Hmm.
I think maybe it does, but you have to wait just a tremendous amount of time before you
Hmm.
can actually get anything that seems like credits. But they try to pull it off as if like this is footage that was supposed to be private, that was shared with, I can't remember who published it. Maybe it was like Paramount, and Paramount was responsible for piecing it together or whatever. Um, the one movie that I feel like is maybe my Blair Witch Project is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, I recognize it as like this cornerstone of horror, and I think it is just like a truly bad movie. It is just like so obnoxious. I think that there is so much yelling. Like I would say that like it feels like 50% of the movie is just people yelling. And it, if I had seen that movie in theaters when it came out, and in like, when was that? Like mid 70s? Like if I was a teenager in the mid 70s and I had watched that movie, maybe my perspective on that would be totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And then anytime that somebody brought it up or I rewatched it, so much of my enjoyment of that movie would be wrapped up into my life within the culture at that time. But gosh, I just, I think of that movie, and having watched it, I think I watched it like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but just I usually go into those movies not really having any expectations, but just really did not enjoy it at all.
Mm-hmm. And you're going back to Altered States, correct?
Well, that specifically for that, I'm talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay, so yeah. And I have not seen the original Texas Chainsaw, but people love it. But you're right, people love it, and it kind of reminds me of like 70s films. I don't know why I'm thinking of like, I think of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think of like Stephen King-esque films like Children of the Corn, like. That was early 90s, right? Like that to me, like I feel like farm horror. I don't know if you want to call it farm horror. It just feels like that also was a genre that like maybe I think appeals to like a certain demographic. Like we don't live by a farm, you know what I mean? But maybe that's relevant to like, certain fear factors for people, besides just the cultural aspect, it could be location based too, or movies about like typhoons or tsunamis might scare people more on the coast, so fear, it's a very interesting topic because like fear is so different for so many different people. But I think when it comes down to like film and like physical film, it's like sometimes it's hard to capture all the pieces of that and like make it stand the test of time. But it doesn't, I don't think, again, like you said, the directors don't probably think about that, or they didn't think about that. I think now that's kind of like, I think that's almost part of a critique now, is like, does this movie stand the test of time? I think film now probably does it way better than it used to.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's funny because I think that somebody who made a video about like a genuinely good perspective about how to critique things is Dunkey. Dunkey has a video about like video game critics, and a lot of it is, and like I've really thought about this in terms of just reviewing movies, reviewing really anything, but less about being this like critic who is like super plugged in and knows all the lingo, but more about like being consistent, like somebody who is, because there are people I follow on Letterboxd who have a similar movie taste as I do. And that doesn't mean that they've got excellent movie taste or they've got terrible movie taste. It just means that we have overlap. And I think that what that allows me to do is the things that they wind up liking has a pretty good shot of being things that I wind up liking too. So I don't know that one thing I don't want to do is I certainly don't want to make anybody feel bad for not enjoying a movie that has critical acclaim, but maybe is just older. Like that's definitely not the takeaway I think we should have, because like, again, like I think I didn't like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Maybe somebody else did, and they're maybe younger than I am. But I think one important aspect of being a critic is just sort of being consistent and also being honest about what you liked and didn't like. Yeah. And I think that what you do is you wind up finding people with similar tastes, and the things that they see and you had no idea existed, I think, end up being recommendations that have a good shot of being something you enjoy. But yeah, I don't know. I find this kind of interesting because I think there are genuinely movies that I just can't give a fair shake no matter how much I try, just because it can't cross this either cultural boundary or visual effect boundary. I mean, Altered States was definitely like that. Like I felt like there was so much in that movie where I was like, I can't take this seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I 100% agree. I think consistency is key, but also I was thinking, I think my thoughts about movies kind of change as time goes. I mean, and I'm thinking in the short term, like the long term, I think is more easy to say would I watch it again or not, and that's kind of where it ends when I think of of a movie I saw like 10 years ago, whatever. But, like you give it time, like you give it a day, you give it a couple of days, and then your kind of ideas change about it, or your thoughts change maybe about it. I think again, staying consistent is definitely important. I think going back to the film Altered States, I think again, I don't know if I changed my mind about it. I didn't. I thought aside from the visual effects, like in the ways that it helped them, I think for the most part it helped them. It did not help them at the end. It didn't help them with like the way that the people's bodies were like more like one looked like it was stone, and like the woman looked like a lava. She's like a lava beat, like a, you know. And again, to me, it's like I don't know how people can think like that in the 70s and be like, that's good. But again, my perspective is far different because I'm born, I was, we live in 2024, so, and there are movies now where I can say the
Yeah.
same thing that are definitely produced in this day and age, like, and I'm just like, wow, those graphics are bad. Like they don't look good. It clearly looks so fake, like, and I'm a big fan of like practical effects over like CGI, but like, and I think I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but like generally, like I think of a film that had good CGI. I think Lord of the Rings, right? Like the people that like the armies, wow, so good. Except it's marred by some stupid things like Legolas's hand under going underneath the horse, and like you could see it twist, and it's just like it looks so stupid. So it's like you gotta know that the people had. I mean, at the end of the day, like when the film was done, like did people end up leaving that film saying, that was a good film, but that that little cheap trick they did looked pretty goofy, even in the 70s. I don't know. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I think on the at the same time that I want to make sure that when I watch a movie that I'm giving it the fairest chances possible, like I'm
mhm.
not letting anything come between what could possibly be an enjoyable movie and my experience watching it. But at the same time, I don't think I don't think a movie should be good simply because it tried some ambitious special effects that didn't land. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like
No,
I
yeah.
don't think that it should I don't think it should be I don't think people should watch a movie like that and say, you know what, every other part was lousy, but they really, tried their best with what they had as far as visual effects go. Like
Hmm.
that just isn't going to lend you a great score, at least for me personally.
Hmm.
But I mean, like there were plenty of movies that are older that I genuinely love, like a lot of old Alfred Hitchcock stuff. Like I love Rope. I love obviously Psycho, the movie 12 Angry Men. And a lot of those movies are either black and white, and some of them take place in effectively one room and have
Hmm.
like two or three different cuts.
Hmm.
Like I think that it is definitely, I mean, obviously, like I obviously think it's possible to watch those older movies and really appreciate them as if they were made a year or two ago. But I think that at least for me, I can't watch a movie and then go on Wikipedia and be like, oh wow, this was the inspiration for movies like The Fly. I should appreciate this more. Like I can't really get
Hmm.
myself into that type of mindset.
Hmm. Yeah, you're kind of looking out from like a zoomed out lens, like, and I think that's part of where reviewing old films because a bit unique is because you can make those comparatives. But at the time, The Fly wasn't, with Jeff Goldblum, wasn't out in '86. Like, so in and of its own is Altered States like a film that like stood the test of time. I mean, again, that's kind of what we're discussing, but you know what I mean. It's just you know we can look through different lenses as we zoom out and as like time goes on, and is it part of the critique? I mean, it's kind of up to you to determine, is that important to you or is it not. But how we see things, like, consistency is key.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that it's. I think it should be. I think you should definitely go into a movie and not let any aspect of it be the sole factor for bringing it down. Like there are plenty of movies that I think you and I have both watched where we would say, "Wow, the visual effects today are way better than what they were doing in this movie." But it's also like, okay, well, but the movie we're talking about is Indiana Jones. Like that's a or Back to the Future. It's like this is a 5-star movie.
yeah,
So yeah. Anyway, I thought this would be interesting to talk about just in light of the couple of movies that we had seen last, like you watching Blair Witch Project, which is again not all that old, but it is crazy to think that that's 25 years old at this point. And then Altered States, which is demonstrably older, but I thought that this is something that is worth kind of thinking about.
Sure.
And everybody has to do their own sort of calculus to determine how much this kind of thing factors into the way that they watch movies, consume media, listen to music, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and if you have any comments about it and you want some input, you can always put comments in our Spotify podcast.
All right. And then that's how do we end this one? I think everybody put your hands in, all right? I'm going to count us off. 1, 2, 3. Movie time.